A friend of mine who I haven't seen in a little while, Matt Gaetz, is here. Where's Matt? He's around here someplace. He's got a big career set up.
This report's findings determine there is substantial evidence that Matt Gaetz had sex with a minor, engaged in rampant illicit drug use, and violated multiple state laws.
The day after Donald Trump stood on stage in front of thousands of people at a conservative convention and publicly praised former MAGA Republican congressman and former Trump Attorney General nominee Matt Gaetz, whom he described as a friend, the Bipartisan Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives released a devastating bombshell report concluding, among other things, that not only did Matt Gaetz use illicit drugs, he had sex with a minor and attempted to obstruct its investigation. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, this is, in a sane world, this would be devastating. This would be an indictment, disqualifying, irrefutable indictment, not only of Matt Gaetz in particular, but also Donald Trump, and also the MAGA Republican movement collectively. Imagine as we go through this that the shoe were on the other foot, and this was President Biden instead of Donald Trump, that this was a Democratic congressman instead of Matt Gaetz, but the details were largely the same. How would the American people, the American media, react? I'll start with Trump first, because at the end of the day, this is the man who empowered Matt Gaetz. This is what Donald Trump had to say yesterday at the Conservative America Fest about Matt Gaetz.
A friend of mine who I haven't seen in a little while, Matt Gaetz, is here. Where's Matt? He's around here someplace. Matt Gaetz. He's got a big career set up. And just want to say hello to Matt.
Oh, what a lovely shout out. What a lovely shout out. His friend, Matt Gaetz, someone with a really great career set up. Matt Gaetz left the United States House of Representatives. His nomination to be Trump's Attorney General was withdrawn by him after it appeared that he would not be confirmed. He has announced that he will host his own show on the One America News Network, a talk show. And we'll get into something else that Matt Gaetz himself announced at America Fest because, of course, he was invited there and he spoke. But before we get to all of that, let's get with the other bombshell that happened today.
CBS News has obtained a final draft of the House Ethics Committee report on former Congressman Matt Gaetz. The bipartisan committee, led by Republicans, includes some shocking allegations. Scott McFarland has the latest. Scott, good morning.
Hey, Adriana, good morning to you. This report's findings determine there is substantial evidence that Matt Gaetz had sex with a minor, engaged in rampant illicit drug use, and violated multiple state laws while in office. The report lists payments totaling more than $90,000 to 12 different women between 2017 to 2020 and alleges the money was likely connected to sexual activity and drugs, including cocaine and ecstasy. The committee also obtained testimony that alleges Gaetz had sex twice with a 17-year-old girl. The victim told the committee she recalled receiving $400 in cash from Gaetz, which she understood to be payment for sex. Gaetz is also accused of creating a fake email from his Capitol Hill office for the purpose of purchasing marijuana and referred to drugs as party favors, rolls, and vitamins. The report did not uncover sufficient evidence of violations of federal sex trafficking laws, and Gaetz has denied any improper conduct, writing last week that his behavior in his 30s may have been embarrassing, though not criminal. The former congressman refused to sit for sworn testimony, only submitting written answers to some of the committee's questions.
Yikes. And we're going to get into some of the details. We're going to look at actually first a Just the News article on this topic, and then we'll actually look at the document itself. But the House Ethics Committee gathered evidence that former Representative Matt Gaetz of Florida paid multiple women for sex, including a 17-year-old high school junior, used illicit drugs like cocaine and ecstasy, and obstructed efforts by Congress to investigate his conduct, according to a draft of its findings obtained by Just the News ahead of its official release Monday. The draft report also said it did not find evidence that Gaetz had engaged in sex trafficking, as some had alleged, including that all the women who traveled with Gaetz out of their home states did so voluntarily, even if they accepted payments for sex. The report lays out sordid details of Gaetz's alleged drug-fueled partying with young women based on interviews with those women and eyewitnesses, but saved some of its harshest criticism for the former Florida Republicans' refusal to cooperate completely with the years-long ethics inquiry. The draft report alleges that he refused to comply with a subpoena demanding an interview and sent only partial written answers, and that he, quote, intentionally withheld information, end quote, about his trip with women to the Bahamas and the fact that he took a prohibited free private plane ride back. But Representative Gaetz clearly understood that he had acted contrary to House rules by accepting a private plane travel, but chose to try to cover up his actions rather than comply with the committee's request, the draft stated. And it goes into, again, some of the details. In an interview with Just the News on Sunday night, Gaetz said he had not seen the draft, but that the contents described to him were similar to what the committee had alleged to him prior in communications. He also forcefully denied any wrongdoing, insisting the payments to women were gifts to girlfriends from a wilder, younger time in his life. He emphasized the Biden Justice Department reviewed all the evidence and chose not to bring any criminal charges. He said he had personally possessed evidence showing the women cited in the report expressed affection for him, asked him out on dates, and asked him for financial help for items unrelated to sex. So he is still denying it. Again, we'll get into the details. Let's start with this, though. Just a couple of other things to really drive home. As Brian Tyler Cohen, friend of the show, points out, quoting Elon Musk, the House Ethics Committee report just alleged that Gaetz paid a 17-year-old girl, a minor, to engage in sexual activity with him. But sure, hammer of justice, got it. And he's quote tweeting Elon Musk, the de facto president-elect, the de facto leader of the Republican Party, who said this at the time that Gaetz had been nominated to be Trump's attorney general. Elon Musk said, Matt Gaetz has three critical assets that are needed for the AG role: big brain, a spine of steel, and an axe to grind. He is the judge dread America needs to clean up a corrupt system and put powerful bad actors in prison. Gaetz will be our hammer of justice. Now, in contrast, another Trump-loyal Republican, former Republican Speaker Kevin McCarthy, with whom Gaetz had a deeply and increasingly public feud, had this to say about Matt Gaetz a year ago.
And I'll give you the truth why I'm not Speaker. It's because one person, a member of Congress, wanted me to stop an ethics complaint because he slept with a 17-year-old. An ethics complaint that started before I ever became Speaker, and that's illegal, and I'm not going to get in the middle.
So, that was Kevin McCarthy talking about why Matt Gaetz triggered the motion to vacate, which ultimately led Kevin McCarthy to lose his job in, I think it was September of 2023. And then he later on resigned from Congress, I think it was December 2023, outright. He said Gaetz was motivated by a personal grudge because McCarthy wouldn't use his leverage and his power to kill this ethics investigation into him, which McCarthy was correct in this respect. That ethics investigation began in 2021 when McCarthy was not Speaker of the House, when he was simply the minority leader, when Nancy Pelosi was the Speaker of the House. Now, I should also note again that the Ethics Committee is not only bipartisan. Right now, it is led by Republicans. Keep all that in mind. Now, Brian also points out, friend of the show, that this is who MAGA wanted as the top law enforcement official in the United States, and he chooses a summary page from the ethics investigation. So let's look into this. This is a PDF of the Ethics Committee's final report. We're going to read the introduction. The committee has not typically released its findings after losing jurisdiction in a matter. However, there are a few prior instances where the committee has determined that it was in the public interest to release its findings even after a member's resignation from Congress. And I'll point out, as a reminder, Matt Gaetz resigned from Congress the day that Trump nominated him to be Attorney General, which is unusual, right? Number one, Trump had not been inaugurated yet. Trump is still not inaugurated yet, so it's not like he was in a position to snap his fingers and put Gaetz in that role immediately, number one. Number two, the timing reveals the true motivation because the day after Gaetz abruptly resigned was a scheduled day for the House Ethics Committee to vote on whether or not to release this report. So it seems pretty clear that Gaetz quickly resigned from Congress in hopes of forestalling or preempting the release of this report. And we have evidence that he did try to prevent this report from being released. We'll get to that as well. But getting back to it. The committee does not do so lightly. In this instance, although several committee members objected, a majority of the members of the committee agreed that the committee's findings should be released to the public. In sum, the committee found substantial evidence of the following. From at least 2017 to 2020, Gaetz regularly paid women for engaging in sexual activity with him. In 2017, Gaetz engaged in sexual activity with a 17-year-old girl. During the period of 2017 to 2019, Gaetz used or possessed illegal drugs, including cocaine and ecstasy, on multiple occasions. Gaetz accepted gifts, including transportation and lodging in connection with a 2018 trip to the Bahamas, in excess of permissible amounts because the House of Representatives, to their credit, they are bound by binding enforceable ethics. Unlike the United States Supreme Court, a rogue body which is unelected and unaccountable, according to Clarence Thomas, and can do whatever the hell they want, Matt Gaetz, like AOC and Jim Jordan and any other member of Congress, Republican or Democrat, they are held to strict ethics standards. As a matter of fact, I think it's a $50 gift limit. If you try to give a congressperson a gift that's valued at over $50, they either can't accept or they have to report it. That's how strict it is. And that's the way it should be, by the way. I digress. In 2018, Gaetz arranged for his chief of staff to assist a woman with whom he had engaged in sexual activity in obtaining a passport, falsely indicating to the U.S. Department of State that she was a constituent. Gaetz knowingly and willfully sought to impede and obstruct the committee's investigation of his conduct. Gaetz has acted in a manner that reflects discreditably upon the House. Based on the above, the committee concluded that there was substantial evidence that Representative Gaetz violated House rules, state and federal laws, and other standards of conduct prohibiting prostitution, statutory rape, illicit drug use, acceptance of impermissible gifts, and the provision of special favors and privileges, and obstruction of Congress. And then it notes that they did not find sufficient evidence to conclude that he violated federal sex trafficking statutes for the reasons that the second clip that we played provided, and as we discussed in the article. Now, I do want to focus on a couple of sections here at the very bottom because they go into they discuss specifics about the two that really stood out to me, which was the statutory rape charge and the obstruction. Okay? The committee found that Representative Gaetz violated Florida's statutory rape law. There's substantial evidence that Gaetz engaged in sexual activity with a 17-year-old girl. The committee received credible testimony from victim A herself, as well as multiple individuals corroborating the allegation. Several of those witnesses have also testified under oath before a federal grand jury and in a civil litigation. Gaetz denied the allegation but refused to testify under oath. That's a big one. He has publicly stated that victim A, quote, doesn't exist and that he has not, quote, had sex with a 17-year-old since I was 17. The committee found that to be untrue and determined there is substantial evidence that Gaetz had sex with victim A in July 2017 when she was 17 years old and he was 35. Gaetz's actions were in violation of Florida's statutory rape law. Gaetz has suggested that the allegations against him have been manufactured and that Mr. Greenberg, who by the way was a former friend and associate of Gaetz, and victim A are not credible. The committee has acknowledged Greenberg's credibility is in doubt. The committee received additional evidence from Greenberg that is not included in this report, much of it salacious but unverifiable, although consistent with the nature of the conduct that the committee learned of from other witnesses. The committee found no reason to doubt the credibility of victim A. Gaetz has suggested the fact that she has, through her attorneys, expressed an intention to seek civil redress against him for raping her means she has a financial motive that undermines the veracity of her claims. The committee reviewed a letter from counsel to victim A to counsel for Gaetz, which stated she intended, quote, to pursue claims against Gaetz, including child sex trafficking and statutory rape. Regardless of whether victim A had any pecuniary motive in sending such a communication, she cooperated with DOJ's investigation for years and was let down by the justice system when reports circulated that DOJ would be unlikely to pursue charges against Gaetz. Victim A is entitled to all of the protections and remedies available to her under civil laws, and her intention to pursue claims against Gaetz and others does not negate her credibility. Moreover, as discussed above, the committee obtained testimony and documentary evidence from other witnesses corroborating the allegations. Gaetz' statutory rape of victim A was a violation of Florida law, the Code of Official Conduct, and the Code of Ethics for Government Service. The committee received evidence that Gaetz did not learn that the victim A was 17 years old until more than a month after their first sexual encounters. However, statutory rape is a strict liability crime. After he learned the victim A was a minor, he maintained contact, and less than 6 months after she turned 18, he met up with her again for commercial sex. When Mr. Greenberg was prosecuted for sex trafficking the same individual, Gaetz denied she existed. His conduct reflects discreditably upon the House. That's one of the big ones. illicit drug use, all the other things, those are all problems. But to me, the other big standout is the committee found Gaetz sought to obstruct its investigation of his conduct. The committee found substantial evidence that Gaetz engaged in obstructive conduct with respect to the committee's investigation. Gaetz pointed to evidence that would exonerate him, yet failed to produce any such materials. Gaetz continuously sought to deflect, deter, or mislead the committee in order to prevent his actions from being exposed. This was most notable with respect to the committee's specific requests regarding the Bahamas trip. As discussed above, Gaetz intentionally withheld information relating to his return trip via private plane. Gaetz clearly understood that he acted contrary to House rules by accepting the private plane travel, but chose to try to conceal his actions rather than comply with the committee's request. Despite asserting he wanted an opportunity to address the allegations against him, Gaetz declined to provide testimony voluntarily and did not appear when subpoenaed. Gaetz was also provided ample time to review and produce documents requested at various points in the committee's investigation, yet he produced only a handful of non-public documents to the committee. These documents were largely irrelevant, corresponding to time periods after most of the relevant conduct occurred. Likewise, Gaetz informed the committee that he would, quote, welcome the opportunity to respond to written questions, and then the committee sent a list of 16 questions. After requesting an extension to respond to written questions, which was granted, it appears that Gaetz used that time to craft a public letter mischaracterizing the committee's requests and asserting, quote, he would, quote, no longer voluntarily cooperate, despite his uncooperative approach throughout the review. His actions undermine not only his claims that he had exculpatory information to provide, but also his claims that he intended to cooperate with the committee in good faith. It is apparent Gaetz's assertions were nothing more than attempts to delay the committee's investigation. And it goes on and on and on about his attempts to deter, to mislead, to thwart the bipartisan House Ethics Committee's investigation into him. This is stunning. This is absolutely stunning. Rick Wilson, I believe of the Lincoln Project, pointed this out. I think it's worth noting. I guess this Ethics Committee report on Matt Gaetz puts in context why he was the only vote against the 2017 human trafficking bill, because he was enjoying the ugly fruits of human trafficking with underage prostitutes. Now, again, worth noting that the report says that they found insufficient evidence to say that he violated federal human trafficking laws. And the DOJ did not pursue criminal charges against Gaetz, but you also have to remember that the standard for those things are beyond a reasonable doubt. The fact that the DOJ felt that they couldn't prove the case against Gaetz beyond all reasonable doubt does not mean that there is not credible evidence that he did break the law. Right? There's a difference between we can prove it beyond all reasonable doubt to there's no evidence whatsoever. This is a legislative bipartisan ethics committee. And what they've concluded is there is substantial evidence. And I'll also note that Gaetz tried to seek a restraining order just today to halt the release of the House Ethics report. Matt Gaetz sought a restraining order Monday against the House Ethics Committee in an effort to halt the panel's expected release of a final report summarizing its investigation into him. The filing accuses the committee of an unconstitutional attempt to exercise jurisdiction over a private citizen through the threatened release of an investigative report containing potentially defamatory allegations in violation of the committee's own rules. Now, here's where I want you to think about this. It's so interesting. You know who else was a private citizen that was the subject of multiple legislative investigations? Republicans in the Senate, Republicans in the House. Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden, who was not a government official, who did not serve in his father's administration, but was merely a private citizen who happened to be related to the former vice president and current president of the United States. And not only did Matt Gaetz cheerlead the investigations into private citizen Hunter Biden, he was an eager, outspoken, high-profile participant in those investigations. The double standard, the shamelessness, cannot be overstated. He's saying, why are you doing to me what I gleefully did to Hunter Biden? And I would argue even that's being too generous, because Gaetz until recently was an elected member of Congress, and much of the conduct that he engaged He was not only a representative at the time of the investigation, he engaged in the misconduct when he was a representative as well. It's not like this conduct predates his time as an elected member of Congress. It was during his time in office. So it's infinitely more relevant to anything that Hunter Biden has been ever accused of doing or investigated for. And so now he's clutching his pearls and crying foul because he's a hypocrite, because he's an unprincipled, hypocritical loser who should be relentlessly mocked for the rest of his life. He is morally inferior to every elected Democrat. Every. Despicable. But their shamelessness is their superpower. As a matter of fact, bringing it all the way full circle, in that first clip, when Donald Trump said, "My friend Matt Gaetz, he's got a great career set up," this is what Matt Gaetz said at that same conservative festival on the same day as Donald Trump.
Many have asked which perch I will be fighting from next. And some of you throughout this conference have even given me a few suggestions. My fellow Floridians have asked me to eye the governor's mansion in Tallahassee. Maybe special counsel to go after the insider trading for my former colleagues in Congress. It seems I may not have had enough support in the United States Senate. Maybe I'll just run for Marco Rubio's vacant seat in the United States Senate and join some of those folks. And my friend Steve Bannon and others have suggested that I return to the House of Representatives on January 3rd, but I would remind Steve, when he got out of prison, he didn't punch a guard on the way out. For the moment, I'll enjoy being one of you. It was James Madison who said that the most powerful position in America would not be congressman or senator or even president, but
Yeah, blah, blah, blah. The bottom line is he's entertaining running for the governor's mansion in Florida after Ron DeSantis leaves, or potentially for the Senate. Because when Marco Rubio, the current Floridian senator, leaves to become Donald Trump's Secretary of State, that will create a vacancy, which can be filled by Ron DeSantis. So, it's entirely possible that Matt Gaetz would find his way back in government. I said it before, he didn't make it to the Attorney General position, but some senior White House staff can be appointed without Senate confirmation. Senior advisor to the president, White House chief of staff, arguably the second most powerful role in the federal government besides the president himself. That's not Senate confirmable. There's nothing preventing Donald Trump, or rather his boss, shadow president Elon Musk, from eventually getting tired of Susie Wiles, Donald Trump's current chief of staff, firing her the way that Trump's previous chiefs of staff were fired, and replacing her with somebody like Matt Gaetz. So, all I'll say in summation is this is not some random conservative. This is not some random Republican voter. This was until recently a multiple times elected Republican congressman who was very close to Donald Trump, his friend, his nominee to be his first draft pick to be the chief law enforcement officer in the country, and somebody who may yet have a prominent role in politics still. This is an indictment of the current Republican Party because Matt Gaetz is very much emblematic of that party. And in a sane world, this would be an albatross around the neck of Donald Trump. Donald Trump in a sane world would be forced to answer questions about Matt Gaetz in every goddamn interview he ever does until the end of his career. The way it would be if it were a Democrat. Do any of us expect that that's going to be the case? Because I don't. Truly despicable, an indictment of the conservative party in this country, the MAGA movement, and I expect ultimately our media. Food for thought. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.